What would you do if the woman you kept hidden in luxury betrayed you with the one person you trusted above all others? In the glittering fortress of Dubai's elite, where family is everything and betrayal is unforgivable, Khalid Al-Mazrouei was about to discover that some secrets don't just destroy relationships, they detonate entire dynasties. This isn't a story about a crime of passion. This is the dark tale of how blood became thicker than love, how a pregnancy test became a murder weapon, and how the most expensive penthouse in Dubai Marina became a tomb for the woman who dared to love two brothers. What the media never told you was that the real crime began long before the murder. It started the moment three people convinced themselves that loyalty could coexist with betrayal. The Al-Mazrouei name meant power in Dubai, the kind that doesn't need introduction or explanation. It was written across the skyline in steel and glass. Luxury hotels bearing their brand. Shopping malls where European designers competed for retail space. Residential towers that housed ministers and celebrities. The family's wealth stretched back 3 generations to oil concessions secured when Dubai was still a pearl diving outpost, and it had multiplied through real estate investments so strategic they seemed almost clairvoyant. Khalid Al-Mazrouei stood at the apex of this empire at 38 years old. He occupied the corner office on the 45th floor of Mazrouei Tower in downtown Dubai, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the Burj Khalifa piercing the sky like a crystalline spear. His desk, imported mahogany from Myanmar, held 3 phones, one for business, one for family, one for everything that couldn't be discussed on recorded lines. The walls displayed photographs with Dubai's ruler, framed deals worth hundreds of millions, and a single family portrait that anchored everything. His father Sheikh Rashid, his mother Sheikha Fatima, himself, and his younger brother Tariq. That photograph was taken 10 years earlier, before their father's death, before Khalid inherited not just wealth but the crushing responsibility of preserving a dynasty. The 4 faces in the frame smiled with the confidence of people who believed their world was unshakable. They had been wrong. Khalid's office reflected a man obsessed with control. Every paper was aligned perfectly, every meeting scheduled to the minute, every phone call logged and categorized. This precision extended to his personal life, which was divided into neat compartments that never overlapped. There was his public life. Married to Noura Al-Falasi, daughter of a prominent Abu Dhabi family, mother of his 3 sons who attended the most exclusive British boarding schools. Their marriage was a merger of dynasties, strategic and profitable, maintained with the efficiency of a well-run corporation. Then there was his private life, the one that existed in a penthouse apartment on the 82nd floor of Marina Heights, the tallest residential tower in Dubai Marina. This was where compartmentalization became art form, where Khalid kept the secret that would eventually destroy everything. Her name was Isabella Reyes, and she had entered his world the way most Filipina women entered the lives of wealthy Gulf men, through service, through necessity, through the invisible infrastructure that kept Dubai functioning. She had been hired 3 years earlier as a private events coordinator for Mazrouei Hospitality Group, tasked with organizing the high-profile parties and corporate galas that maintained the family's social standing. At 29, Isabella possessed a dangerous combination of beauty and intelligence. Delicate features inherited from her Chinese Filipino mother, sharp business instincts honed by years of surviving in Dubai's competitive hospitality industry, and the kind of quiet ambition that wealthy men always noticed. Their first meeting occurred at the launch party for the family's newest hotel, a glittering affair attended by foreign investors and local royalty. Khalid watched her manage the chaos with impressive efficiency, redirecting caterers, solving minor crises, ensuring every detail aligned with his exacting standards. But it was later, after the guests departed and the staff began cleanup, that he found her sitting alone on the hotel's terrace, shoes kicked off, exhaustion written across her face. "You did well tonight," he said, approaching with 2 glasses of champagne. Isabella looked up, surprised to find the billionaire owner speaking to her. She accepted the glass with practiced professionalism. "Thank you, Mr. Al-Mazrouei. The event exceeded expectations." "Khalid," he corrected. "When it's just us, call me Khalid." That was how it began. Not with grand seduction or dramatic declarations, but with small erosions of professional boundaries. A conversation extending past its natural end. A shared meal after a successful event. Text messages that started with work questions and evolved into something more personal. The penthouse apartment in Marina Heights became theirs 6 months into their affair. Khaled furnished it specifically for Isabella. Modern minimalist design mixed with touches of Filipino culture that she mentioned missing from home. A painting of Manila Bay at sunset. Books by Filipino authors she loved. A kitchen stocked with ingredients for dishes her grandmother had taught her to cook. The apartment was a gilded cage designed to feel like freedom. "This is too much," Isabella said the first time Khaled brought her to the furnished penthouse. Overwhelmed by luxury she'd never dreamed of accessing. "You deserve this," Khaled replied, pulling her close. "You deserve everything." What he meant was, "You deserve everything I choose to give you within the boundaries I set, for as long as I decide to keep you." Isabella understood this implicitly. She had worked in Dubai long enough to know how these arrangements functioned. Wealthy married men kept mistresses in luxury apartments across the city, Russian models in Dubai Marina, Lebanese singers in Jumeirah Beach residence, British executives in downtown. The unspoken contract was simple. Discretion in exchange for comfort, invisibility in exchange for financial security. But Isabella wanted more than comfort. She wanted permanence. Over 3 years, she became essential to Khaled in ways that transcended physical desire. She learned to read his moods, to soothe his stress after difficult business negotiations, to provide sanctuary from the constant pressure of family expectations. In the penthouse, Khaled could shed the weight of being the Al-Mazrouei heir and simply be a man who laughed at her jokes, who cooked meals alongside her in the kitchen, who fell asleep with his head in her lap while she played with his hair. "Tell me something true," Isabella said one night as they lay tangled in sheets overlooking Dubai's glittering lights. "What do you mean?" Khaled traced lazy patterns on her shoulder. "Tell me something you've never told anyone else. Something real." He was quiet for a long moment. "Sometimes I wish I wasn't the eldest son. I wish I could just walk away from all of it. The business, the expectations, the constant performance of being Khalid Al-Mazrouei." "Why don't you?" "Because that's not how family works. The dynasty is bigger than any individual. My father understood that. Now I have to understand it too." Isabella stored that confession carefully, recognizing its value. Khaled's burden was his family legacy, and if she could position herself as relief from that burden, she could become indispensable. But there was a complication neither of them had anticipated. A variable that would transform their carefully controlled affair into catastrophic betrayal. His name was Tariq Al-Mazrouei. Khaled's younger brother by 5 years, Tariq occupied a unique position in the family hierarchy. He bore the Al-Mazrouei name and enjoyed its privileges without carrying the crushing weight of leadership. Where Khaled was disciplined and controlled, Tariq was charismatic and spontaneous. Where Khaled married strategically, Tariq remained single by choice, dating models and actresses with public enthusiasm. Their father had recognized their different temperaments and divided responsibilities accordingly. Khaled managed the empire, Tariq managed its image. Tariq served as chief marketing officer for Mazrouei Holdings, a position that involved traveling constantly, attending international conferences, maintaining relationships with global partners. His Instagram account had 800,000 followers who consumed carefully curated glimpses of his lifestyle, luxury cars, exotic locations, designer clothes. He was Dubai's version of a Playboy prince, beloved by gossip columns and society pages. The brothers maintained a relationship that appeared close but functioned on carefully defined terms. They met for weekly dinners at their mother's villa, attended family functions together, and collaborated professionally with practiced efficiency. Khaled relied on Tariq to be the family's charming face while he managed its serious business. Tariq relied on Khaled to maintain the wealth that funded his lifestyle. But beneath this functional partnership ran undercurrents that neither brother openly acknowledged. Tariq resented living in Khaled's shadow, being forever the younger brother whose opinions carried less weight in family councils. Khaled envied Tariq's freedom from responsibility, the ability to make mistakes without threatening the entire dynasty. The first time Tariq met Isabella was at a Mazrouei hospitality corporate event 18 months into her affair with Khaled. She was introduced simply as Isabella Reyes, our events director, and Tariq's interest was immediate and obvious. He watched her throughout the evening with the focused attention he usually reserved for women he intended to pursue. "Your events coordinator is impressive," Tariq mentioned casually to Khaled after the party. "She's excellent at her job," Khaled replied, his tone carrying a warning that Tariq, distracted by champagne and socializing, completely missed. The second meeting occurred by chance, or perhaps by Isabella's design, though she would never admit it even to herself. She was shopping at Dubai Mall during her day off when she encountered Tariq browsing in a luxury watch boutique. He recognized her immediately, his charming smile activating like a weapon. "Isabella, what a pleasant surprise." Tariq approached with the confidence of a man who had rarely been rejected. "Shopping for anything special?" "Just browsing," she replied, maintaining professional distance while feeling something shift in the air between them. They ended up having coffee at one of the mall's upscale cafes, conversation flowing with surprising ease. Tariq was different from Khaled, more playful, more present, asking questions about her life with genuine curiosity rather than Khaled's controlled interest. He made her laugh with stories about international business disasters, treated her like an equal rather than a secret to be managed. When they parted 2 hours later, Isabella felt something dangerous stirring. The recognition that Khaled had given her luxury but Tariq offered something more seductive. Attention without boundaries. The affair between Isabella and Tariq began 6 weeks later, initiated by another chance encounter that both of them had unconsciously engineered. He invited her to dinner at a restaurant in Abu Dhabi, far enough from Dubai to avoid familiar eyes. She accepted, telling herself this was just friendship, even as she wore her most flattering dress and spent an hour on her makeup. "I know about you and Khaled," Tariq said halfway through dinner, his directness cutting through pretense. Isabella's heart stopped. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." Tariq leaned forward, his voice low and intense. "My brother keeps you in a marina penthouse. He visits twice a week on a schedule that never varies. He pays your salary directly through a shell company. I've known for over a year." The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications. Isabella's mind raced through possibilities. Was this a threat? A warning? Leverage for something? "Are you going to tell him you know?" she finally asked. "No." Tariq's hand crossed the table, fingertips brushing hers. "Because I understand why he chose you. You're extraordinary, Isabella, but you deserve more than being someone's secret." "And what are you offering?" She didn't pull her hand away. "The same arrangement, but with more honesty about what it is. The betrayal should have been impossible. Brothers don't share mistresses. Family loyalty should have created an impenetrable boundary." But Isabella had spent 3 years feeling like a beautiful possession in Khaled's carefully controlled world, and Tariq offered something Khaled never had. The thrill of being chosen, not just acquired. Their affair was more reckless than her relationship with Khaled. Where Khaled demanded discretion, Tariq pushed boundaries. They met at his apartment in Dubai Marina, dangerously close to where she lived with Khaled's money. They rendezvoused in Abu Dhabi hotels where business associates might recognize him. Tariq seemed to derive excitement from the risk, from the secret knowledge that he was taking something from his perfect older brother. For Isabella, the dual affairs became a form of power. She was no longer just the mistress kept in luxury. She was the woman desired by 2 billionaire brothers, the secret that could destroy the Al-Mazrouei dynasty. That power was intoxicating. But power built on deception is inherently unstable. The carefully balanced arrangement began showing cracks in small ways. Khaled noticed Isabella becoming more distant, her attention drifting during conversations. Tariq grew possessive, demanding more time, hinting that she should leave Khaled. Isabella found herself exhausted by the constant performance, the mental gymnastics required to keep her stories straight. The collapse began with something as simple and universal as biology. Isabella's period was late. At first, she dismissed it as stress. Her life had become increasingly complicated, juggling 2 relationships, maintaining appearances at work, managing the anxiety of potential discovery. But 1 week late became 2, Then 3. Morning nausea she attributed to bad food became a persistent symptom that couldn't be ignored. The pregnancy test she took in the penthouse bathroom showed 2 pink lines with unambiguous clarity. Isabella sat on the marble floor, the plastic stick trembling in her hand, as her carefully constructed world began its catastrophic collapse. She was pregnant, but with whose child? The timeline was impossible to determine with certainty. She'd been with Khalid 2 weeks ago. She'd been with Tariq a week before that. The dates blurred together in her memory, overlapping in ways that made paternity a question without easy answers. Isabella's first instinct was panic. Her second was calculation. A child could be leverage or liability depending on how she managed the revelation. If she claimed Khalid as the father and he believed her, it might force him to legitimize their relationship, to acknowledge her existence beyond the penthouse. But if genetic testing revealed otherwise, the consequences would be catastrophic. She needed time to think, to strategize, to understand her options. But fate, operating with its characteristic cruelty, didn't provide that luxury. The revelation came through medical science, specifically through a routine blood test that Isabella underwent at a private clinic in Jumeirah. She had gone for confirmation of the pregnancy and basic prenatal screening, paying cash to avoid insurance records that might somehow connect back to Khalid. The clinic, catering to wealthy expatriates who valued discretion, provided comprehensive testing including advanced genetic screening. It was the blood type results that triggered the first warning signal. Isabella's blood type was A positive. The fetal blood type, determined through a new genetic screening technology the clinic offered, was AB negative. The clinic's genetic counselor, a matronly British woman with 30 years of experience, noticed the discrepancy immediately. "Ms. Reyes," she said gently during the results consultation, "I need to ask about the father's blood type. Are you aware of what it might be?" "Why does that matter?" Isabella asked, anxiety creeping into her voice. "Well, for you to carry an AB negative child with your A positive blood type, the father would need to have AB or B blood type, and specifically be Rh negative. This is quite rare. Only about 1% of the population has AB negative blood. This information is important for managing your pregnancy, particularly regarding Rh incompatibility factors." The words hit Isabella like physical blows. AB negative, rare. 1% of the population. She knew Khalid's blood type. He'd mentioned it once in passing, discussing a blood donation drive his company sponsored. Positive, the universal donor type. Common, completely incompatible with the genetic counselor's explanation. Which meant, that evening, using a connection she'd maintained in the Human Resources Department at Mazrouei Holdings, Isabella accessed employee medical records. It was illegal, risky, and absolutely necessary. She found Tariq's file buried among thousands of employee profiles, his executive medical screening reports detailed and comprehensive. Blood type, AB negative. The room spun. Isabella gripped the desk to steady herself as the full implications crashed down. The child was Tariq's, not Khalid's. The genetics told a story she couldn't hide or manipulate. Any paternity test would reveal the truth immediately. She had been sleeping with 2 brothers, had gotten pregnant by one while maintained by the other, and the biological evidence would expose everything. The confrontation was inevitable, but Isabella still wasn't prepared for how it unfolded. She had planned to tell Tariq first, to manage the revelation strategically. But Khalid, operating with the instincts that had made him a successful businessman, noticed changes she couldn't hide. Her anxiety manifested physically. Weight loss despite the pregnancy, dark circles under her eyes, a nervous energy that vibrated through her whenever they were together. "What's wrong?" Khalid asked one evening in the penthouse, his tone carrying more command than concern. "You've been different for weeks. Nothing's wrong. I'm just tired." Isabella turned away, unable to meet his eyes. Khalid's hand caught her wrist, not violently but firmly. "Don't lie to me. I've known you for 3 years. I can read every expression on your face. What are you hiding?" The words came out before Isabella could stop them, driven by exhaustion and desperation. "I'm pregnant." Khalid's face cycled through emotions too quickly to parse. Surprise, confusion, then something that looked almost like joy before calculation took over. Pregnant. You're certain? Completely certain. I've been tested. The conversation that followed would seal all their fates, though none of them knew it yet. Tariq answered on the second ring, his voice carrying the casual warmth that had always contrasted so sharply with Khalid's controlled intensity. Isabella? It's late. Is everything all right? I need to see you. Tonight. It's urgent. Her voice shook despite her efforts to control it. 30 minutes later, Tariq arrived at his own apartment in Dubai Marina, where Isabella had taken a taxi to avoid security cameras in her building. He found her sitting on his sofa, mascara-streaked and trembling, a woman who looked nothing like the controlled professional he'd been sleeping with for months. What happened? Tariq sat beside her, genuine concern in his eyes. Did something happen with Khaled? I'm pregnant, Isabella said, watching his face carefully. With your child. Whatever reaction she expected, it wasn't what she got. Tariq's expression didn't show shock or denial. Instead, something almost like satisfaction flickered across his features before he controlled it. You're certain it's mine? Blood type testing. Genetic screening. Yes, I'm certain. Tariq stood, pacing his apartment with energy that seemed more excited than distressed. This changes everything. What do you mean? He turned to face her, and Isabella saw something in his expression that she'd never noticed before. Calculation that rivaled Khalid's, ambition that had been hiding behind charm. It means you're carrying an Al-Mazrouei heir, my child. That gives you value, Isabella. Real value. Khalid knows, Isabella said. About us. About the pregnancy. He's threatening me. Wants me to terminate it and leave Dubai. The satisfaction vanished from Tariq's face, replaced by something darker. He knows? How? I told him. The blood type results made hiding it impossible. She reached for Tariq's hand. He said terrible things, threatened to have me deported or worse. Tariq, I'm scared. Tariq pulled her close, but Isabella felt tension in his body that hadn't been there before. My brother is protective of family reputation. But he won't hurt you. Not while you're carrying my child. How can you be sure? Because I won't let him. Tariq's voice carried a hardness she'd never heard before. Khaled has controlled this family long enough. Made all the decisions, held all the power. But this child changes the power dynamic. This proves I'm not just the younger brother living in his shadow. Isabella pulled back, studying Tariq's face. What are you saying? I'm saying we use this. The pregnancy, the affair with both of us, all of it. We turn Khaled's shame into our leverage. Leverage for what? Tariq smiled, and it was nothing like his usual charming grin. For me to get what I've always deserved, real power in this family, not just the scraps Khaled allows me. And for you to get what you want, legitimacy, security, a future as an Al-Mazrouei instead of a hidden mistress. Isabella felt ice form in her stomach. She had imagined Tariq as her escape route, softer and more malleable than Khaled. But looking at him now, she realized she'd simply traded one manipulator for another. Both brothers viewed her as a chess piece in their lifelong competition. I don't want to be used to hurt Khaled, Isabella said quietly. Too late for that. Tariq's expression hardened. You already hurt him. You betrayed him with me, got pregnant, exposed the affair. The damage is done. Now we either leverage it into something beneficial, or we all suffer the consequences. The conversation devolved into planning that made Isabella feel increasingly sick. Tariq outlined a strategy. They would announce the pregnancy publicly, forcing Khaled to either acknowledge it or face scandal. The shame of his mistress being impregnated by his brother would destabilize Khaled's authority in the family. Their mother, traditional and deeply concerned with family honor, would intervene. In the chaos, Tariq would position himself as the responsible brother willing to legitimize his child, contrasting with Khaled's failure to control his personal life. This will destroy him, Isabella whispered. He was willing to destroy you, Tariq countered. Terminate your pregnancy, exile you from Dubai, erase you from existence. Why do you care about protecting him? It was a fair question without a good answer. But Isabella couldn't shake the feeling that she'd become something she never intended. A weapon in a brotherly war she didn't fully understand. She left Tariq's apartment at 3 a.m., exhausted and more confused than when she'd arrived. The taxi ride back to her building should have given her time to think, to process, to plan her next move. But exhaustion had dulled her survival instincts. She didn't notice the black Mercedes that followed her taxi at a discreet distance. Didn't see the driver who watched her enter her building's lobby. Didn't sense that Khaled's surveillance of her movements had begun the moment she left the penthouse earlier that evening. Khaled received the report from his security team at 3:47 a.m. Subject visited Tariq Al-Mazrouei's apartment in Dubai Marina. Departed after 2 hours. Timeline suggests extended private meeting. He sat in his home office in the Arabian Ranches villa he shared with his wife, staring at the brief report that confirmed his worst suspicion. Isabella had gone directly to Tariq, probably to tell him about the pregnancy, possibly to coordinate strategy against him. The betrayal was complete. Not just the affair, but the conspiracy. His brother and his mistress, aligning against him, preparing to weaponize their betrayal into public scandal. Khaled had built his life on control, controlling his emotions, his business, his family's reputation. Every decision was calculated for maximum benefit and minimum risk. But sitting in his office at nearly 4 a.m., reading evidence of his brother's ultimate treachery, something in his carefully constructed psyche cracked. Family was everything. That principle had guided his entire life. He had accepted the burden of leadership, married strategically, sacrificed personal desires for dynastic benefit. And Tariq had taken the one thing Khaled had allowed himself outside family obligations and poisoned it with betrayal. The pregnancy complicated everything. An Al-Mazrouei child, even illegitimate, carried implications. If Isabella and Tariq went public, the scandal would be devastating. Not just to Khaled personally, but to the family's standing. Their mother would be shamed. His wife's family would question the alliance. Business partners would whisper about instability in the dynasty's leadership. But more than strategic considerations, Khaled felt something primal stirring. Rage at being humiliated by the two people he trusted most in his private world. The perfect control he'd maintained for 38 years was disintegrating, replaced by something darker and far more dangerous. He made his decision with the same decisive certainty he applied to business deals. The situation had to be managed permanently, not with legal threats or financial pressure, but with the kind of absolute solution that ensured no future complications. Isabella had to disappear. The next 48 hours unfolded with mechanical precision. Khaled utilized resources he'd built over decades, security personnel whose loyalty was absolute, contacts in law enforcement who understood that some questions shouldn't be asked, and most crucially, his intimate knowledge of how people vanished in Dubai without raising alarms. He sent Isabella a text message at 9 a.m., apologizing for his harsh words the previous night, suggesting they meet to discuss reasonable solutions. The message was designed to seem conciliatory, offering hope that deportation could be avoided, that perhaps financial arrangements could be made. Isabella, desperate for any option that didn't involve destruction or exile, agreed to meet him that evening at the Marina penthouse. Neutral territory, she thought, a place associated with better times when their arrangement had been simple. She told no one about the meeting. Not Tariq, whom she was starting to fear as much as Khaled. Not her roommates, who knew nothing about her secret life. Not the few friends she'd maintained in Manila through occasional video calls. Isabella was completely alone, and she had made herself so through months of deception and isolation. The penthouse on the 82nd floor of Marina Heights was exactly as she remembered, tastefully furnished, floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the Persian Gulf, the kind of luxury she'd once associated with safety. Khaled arrived at 8 p.m., carrying a bottle of wine and wearing an expression of resigned sadness that seemed genuine. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice gentle. "I know I scared you last night. I reacted badly. I'm sorry." Isabella felt relief flood through her, followed immediately by suspicion. Khaled didn't apologize. He dictated terms. "What changed?" she asked carefully. "I thought about what you said, about being trapped, about wanting security. Khalid poured wine into 2 glasses, handed one to her. You're right. I kept you hidden because it was convenient for me. That wasn't fair. So what are you suggesting? Isabella didn't drink the wine, her pregnancy making alcohol inadvisable and her instincts screaming warnings. Let's talk about realistic options. Maybe there's a way forward that doesn't involve termination or exile. Khalid sipped his wine, his demeanor calm. But first, I need to understand something. Do you love Tariq? Or was that just revenge against me? It was a trap question, Isabella realized. Any answer would be weaponized. I don't know, she said honestly. Everything is so confused. Because if you don't love him, Khalid continued, if this was just you seeking something I wasn't providing, maybe we can rebuild. Not what we had before, but something more honest. He moved closer, reaching for her hand. Isabella let him take it, studying his face for signs of deception. She saw only regret and what looked like genuine pain. I know I hurt you by treating you like a secret, Khalid said softly. But you hurt me too. Sleeping with my brother, that's not just betrayal. That's destroying the most important relationship in my life. I'm sorry, Isabella whispered, and she meant it. Whatever her motivations, she had caused real harm. I know you are. Khalid's hand moved to her face, gentle and familiar. That's why I think we can fix this. But I need to know you're committed to fixing it with me, not plotting with Tariq behind my back. I'm not plotting anything, Isabella said. I'm just trying to survive. Then let's ensure you survive comfortably. Khalid kissed her forehead, the gesture almost paternal. Why don't you rest in the bedroom? You look exhausted. I'll make some calls, arrange things so you're protected. Then we'll talk specifics. Isabella nodded, relief and exhaustion overwhelming her suspicion. She moved toward the bedroom, kicked off her shoes, lay down on the familiar bed. The penthouse felt safe again, like returning to a sanctuary after wandering through dangerous territory. She didn't see Khalid lock the penthouse's front door from the inside, securing it with the deadbolt that only opened with a key. Didn't hear him making phone calls in the living room, his voice too low to carry through the walls. Didn't notice the way his demeanor changed the moment her bedroom door closed. Tenderness replaced by cold determination. 20 minutes later, Khalid entered the bedroom where Isabella had drifted into exhausted sleep. He stood over her for a long moment, studying the face that had brought him pleasure and now represented his greatest liability. She looked peaceful, vulnerable, completely unaware that her survival had become incompatible with his. Family was everything. That principle still held. And Isabella had threatened his family in ways that couldn't be forgiven or managed with money and threats. She knew too much, had seen too much, had become too dangerous. The pregnancy she carried would be a permanent connection to his brother's betrayal, a living reminder that would undermine his authority for decades. What happened next occurred with the brutal efficiency of a man who had made an irrevocable decision. There was no hesitation, no last-minute doubt. Khalid had crossed a psychological threshold where Isabella had transformed from person to problem, and problems could be eliminated. The method was quiet, careful, designed to leave minimal evidence of struggle. When it was over, Isabella's body lay still on the bed she'd shared with 2 brothers. Her dreams of security and legitimacy ended in the most permanent way possible. Khalid stood in the bedroom afterward, his breathing controlled, his hands steady despite what he'd just done. He felt no remorse, only relief that a complex situation had been resolved. The body would be discovered eventually, but by then, he would have established alibis, prepared explanations, mobilized resources. He cleaned the penthouse methodically, removing any trace of his presence that evening. Used Isabella's phone to send text messages to Tariq, emotional, accusatory messages that would establish motive and suspicion. Then he left the Marina penthouse for the last time, locking it carefully behind him. Dubai's night air was warm as Khalid drove through empty streets toward his villa. The city glittered around him, indifferent to individual human tragedies, continuing its relentless transformation from desert outpost to global metropolis. Somewhere in those glittering towers, other secrets festered, other betrayals unfolded, Other lives hung in precarious balance. But Khaled's problem was solved. Permanently. The body was discovered 36 hours later by building maintenance, alerted by neighbors who complained about a smell. Dubai police descended on Marina Heights with practiced efficiency, cordoning off the 82nd floor, interviewing residents, gathering evidence. The initial investigation focused on Tariq Al-Mazrouei. The text messages from Isabella's phone, accusing him of abandoning her, threatening to expose their affair, demanding money, created a clear narrative of motive. Security footage showed him visiting her building multiple times in preceding weeks. Phone records documented their extensive communication. Tariq was arrested on suspicion of murder within 48 hours. His protests of innocence, his claims that someone had framed him, fell on skeptical ears. The evidence was substantial, circumstantial, but damning. The trial that followed was a media sensation. Billionaire heir accused of murdering his pregnant mistress. Society pages that had once celebrated Tariq's playboy lifestyle now dissected every detail of the scandal. The Al-Mazrouei family's reputation, carefully cultivated over 3 generations, crumbled under the weight of lurid headlines and courtroom revelations. Their mother, Sheikha Fatima, died of a heart attack 6 months into the trial. The coroner listed natural causes, but everyone knew it was the shame that killed her. Shame that her sons had destroyed everything her husband built, that the family name was now synonymous with murder and betrayal. Khaled attended every day of the trial, sitting in the front row, the perfect image of a devoted brother supporting family through crisis. His testimony was measured and devastating. He had known about Isabella, had been trying to help her transition away from Dubai when she became obsessed with Tariq. The pregnancy, he suggested gently, might have been a ploy to entrap his younger brother into marriage. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning a guilty verdict. Tariq Al-Mazrouei was sentenced to 25 years in Dubai Central Prison for second-degree murder. On the day of sentencing, as guards led his brother away in chains, Khaled met Tariq's eyes across the courtroom. In that brief connection, Tariq saw something that confirmed what he'd suspected throughout the trial: Khaled's absolute calm, his lack of grief or shock, his perfectly constructed narrative that explained everything while revealing nothing. "You did this?" Tariq mouthed silently, his face contorted with rage and despair. Khaled simply looked away, his expression unchanged. Family was everything, and Tariq had betrayed family in the most fundamental way. What came after was merely consequence. 3 years later, Khalid Al-Mazrouei stood in his office on the 45th floor of Mazrouei Tower, looking out at Dubai's ever-evolving skyline. The scandal had damaged the family's reputation but hadn't destroyed it. Money and time had rebuilt what murder and betrayal had threatened. New deals were signed. New towers rose. The machine of wealth creation continued its relentless function. He never visited Tariq in prison, never acknowledged the letters his brother sent, initially protesting innocence, eventually devolving into accusations and rage, finally settling into bitter silence. As far as Khaled was concerned, Tariq had died the night he impregnated Isabella. What remained in prison was simply a consequence being served. Sometimes, late at night in the Arabian ranch's villa he still shared with his wife and sons, Khaled would think about Isabella. Not with remorse exactly, with something more complex. Acknowledgement that she had been collateral damage in a war between brothers that predated her involvement. She had been used by both of them, and she had been destroyed by the one who valued control more than conscience. But mostly, Khaled didn't think about her at all. The penthouse in Marina Heights had been sold immediately after the trial. Furnished, contents donated to charity. Any trace of what had happened there erased by new owners who never knew its history. Isabella's body had been repatriated to Manila, where her family, confused and devastated by news reports they barely understood, buried her in a grave marked with prayers in Tagalog. Dubai continued glittering, indifferent to individual tragedies. The city that promised dreams and delivered nightmares, where fortunes rose like mirages and disappeared just as quickly, where foreign workers came seeking better lives and sometimes vanished without trace. And high above it all, in towers bearing his family name, Khalid Al-Mazrouei continued his work, maintaining the dynasty, controlling his empire, living with the secret that would never be spoken but would always hover in the silence between what was known and what could be proven. Family was everything, and some secrets were necessary to preserve what mattered most. What happens when family loyalty becomes murder and betrayal becomes a death sentence? Sometimes the answer isn't justice. It's just a powerful man standing in his tower, looking down at a city that protects men like him and forgets women like Isabella. In Dubai's glittering fortress of wealth, some crimes are never prosecuted. They're simply erased, like fingerprints wiped from marble, like bodies that disappear, like screams that echo where no one is listening.